In 2025, DeepSeek was the wake-up call. A Chinese AI lab released a free, open-source model that matched America's best, and Silicon Valley panicked for a week. But that was just the opening move. By the middle of 2026, China isn't just catching up anymore. In most months this year, the biggest open AI model released anywhere in the world came from a Chinese lab, not an American one. Here's how that actually happened. For most of the last decade, the assumption was simple. America builds the best AI, China copies it. That was the story in 2017, and honestly, it was still mostly true in 2023. But somewhere in the last 2 years, the gap didn't just close. In one very specific, very measurable way, it flipped. According to an analysis from Hugging Face, in almost every month of 2026, the largest and most capable open-source model released by a Chinese lab was bigger than anything released by an American one. Some months, China's ceiling was over 2.7 trillion parameters. America's largest open release, in 5 of those 7 months, didn't even break 130 billion. That's not a small gap. That's an entirely different scale of ambition. So the real question isn't, is China catching up anymore? It's, why did they choose to compete this way, and why is it working? To understand this, you have to understand the difference in strategy, because Silicon Valley and China's AI industry aren't actually playing the same game. American labs, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, have mostly kept their best models closed. You access them through an app or an API, you pay per use, and the actual weights, the underlying brain of the model, stay locked inside the company. It's a business model built on scarcity. You don't get the model, you rent access to it. China took the opposite bet. Labs like DeepSeek, Alibaba's Qwen team, and Moonshot AI have been releasing their models as open weights, meaning anyone, anywhere, can download the actual model and run it themselves, modify it, build on it, for free or close to it. DeepSeek proved this could work in 2025 when it shook up the entire industry with a model that was both free and genuinely competitive. And instead of that being a one-off, it triggered a wave. By 2026, that wave has multiple companies in it. Moonshot AI released Kimi K3, a 2.8 trillion parameter model, which it's calling the world's biggest open-source model, built specifically to be strong at coding and autonomous task execution. Alibaba followed with Qwen 3.8 Max, another multi-trillion parameter open release. DeepSeek pushed out V4, along with a new agent framework called Harness that lets the model directly interact with code, fix bugs, and run tests on its own. This isn't 3 companies doing the same thing. It's an entire ecosystem racing to out-open each other. And here's why that strategy actually makes sense for China specifically. Facing U.S. export controls that restrict access to the most advanced AI chips, Chinese labs couldn't just outspend America on raw computing power. So instead, they optimized for efficiency, getting more performance out of less hardware, and for distribution. An open model spreads for free. Every developer who builds on top of a Chinese open model instead of a Western closed one becomes part of that ecosystem's gravity. You don't need to win on raw benchmark scores if you win on who the entire developer world builds around. It's working. Alibaba's Qwen model has reportedly overtaken both Meta's and Google's open releases to become the most used open model globally. That's not a Chinese trade publication's claim. That's international developers voting with their downloads. Here's the part that should actually worry Silicon Valley, though. It's not that China is winning on raw model quality. In several independent tests, the top Chinese models still slightly trail the very best closed American systems on head-to-head benchmarks. But that's almost beside the point. Because the game China is playing isn't build the single smartest model. It's become the default infrastructure everyone else builds on. And once a developer, a startup, or a whole country's AI industry is built on top of an open Chinese model, because it's free, because it's good enough, because they can run it themselves without depending on a US company's API. That's an extremely hard position to dislodge, even if an American lab releases something technically superior 6 months later. There's a deeper irony here, too. Some of the same Silicon Valley infrastructure, the data labeling companies that train Western AI models, are now also selling their services to Chinese labs. The same data pipelines powering OpenAI and Anthropic's progress are, in part, also fueling their competitors. Silicon Valley isn't just racing China. In some very real ways, it's training China's team at the same time. So, what does this actually tell us? First, China didn't win by copying anymore. It won by choosing a completely different business model: open instead of closed, distribution instead of scarcity. Second, being open source at massive scale isn't just generosity, it's strategy. It builds a gravitational pull that a slightly better closed model can't easily break. Third, export controls changed the fight, but they didn't stop it. They just forced a more efficient, more distributed competitor to emerge. The AI race isn't a single race anymore. It's two completely different strategies competing for the same future. And right now, it's genuinely too early to say which one wins. If you want to keep track of where this goes, subscribe. I break down the biggest shifts in AI and business every week.